Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week I'll be speaking of the double reading consisting of the two parshiot, Matot, meaning tribes or rods, like steel rods, so to speak, and Masai, meaning journeys. When a double reading comes along, we also like to dwell upon the contrasts and connections between the two parshiot that combine to form the week's Torah portion. So I'll try and do that here today also. And I'll be looking at some readings from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to help me along. So, what's the lesson of Matot, and what, in essence, of Masai also, and what's the connection between them, and what's the significance that these two parshiot are always read, some years separately and other years together during the 3 weeks which we are in now, the 21-day period from the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, when we mourn the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and the onset of the centuries-long galus, our exile and our spiritual displacement. So let's start with the discussion. And the first term I'd like to discuss is the word hardness. What does hardness mean? Hardness is one of those qualities which we are forever seeking to acquire and also to rid ourselves of it at the same time. There's no more than a hint of condemnation when we describe a particular individual as a tough person, right? There's some like condemnation there. He's a tough person. But there's also a small measure of admiration as well. You know, the person's tough. He sticks to his principles. Okay. So it's important to have a backbone, to stand one's ground, to not be swayed from one's principles. But it's also, when you're tough, you can be mean, unyielding, unbending, can also have a negative connotation. So, indeed, like our journey through life requires firmness as well as flexibility, hardness as well as pliancy. There are times and situations that necessitate that we be tough, and there's times and situations that necessitate that we be pliable and amenable to change. There's also, the Chazal says, a person should have two pockets in his coat. In one pocket, he should keep the verse, I am but dust and ashes. And his second pocket should contain the verse, for my sake, the world was created. So there's like a dichotomy there. I'm nothing but dust and ashes. And then in the other breath, for my sake, the whole world was created. That's a dual approach to life. And this dual approach to life is implied in the Torah's two names for the tribes of Israel. While the people of Israel constitute one entity as God's singular nation, Am Yisrael, they are comprised of 12 distinct tribes, each of which constitutes its unique character and potential to our national mission. Thus, the Torah refers to the tribes as shvatim, branches, or also matos, rods, expressing the idea that they are offshoots from a common stem, distinct from each other, yet parts of the greater whole. While shevet, a branch, and mata, a rod, are both synonyms for branch, the shevet, the branch, is a pliant, flexible like a bow. It bends while it's connected to the tree, while the mata connotes a stiff stick or a rod. Therein lies the significance of these two names for the tribes of Israel. On certain occasions, the Torah refers to us as branches, stressing the need for flexibility and attractability in life. In other contexts, we are called rods, underscoring the need for firmness and determination in carrying out our mission as a holy people and a light unto nations. So this latter point is the lesson of the Parsha of Matot, which opens with the verse, I'll read it here, and Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes. Here the tribes are called by the name Matot, not Shevet, but Matot, a designation which becomes the name of the Parsha, which we're reading, Parshas Matot, and the crux of the message. There are times in history of a people when they must employ the fortitude and fixity of the rod toughness, when they must find their inner resolve to stick it out in a hostile and sometimes violent world. So that's the first point I want to make. If we look at this Shevet Mata model, so to speak, Shevet branch, Mata rod, as a branch, as I mentioned before, the Shevet is supple and yielding. It bends while it's attached to the tree. It's pliable and it bends to the wind and moves with the wind. But when it's disconnected from the tree to face the elements alone, becomes as a rootless rod, it stiffens into a mata. In other words, then, a mata, the rod, is a shevet, a branch, hardened by the existence of the galus. Once we're out in the galus, this branch becomes a mata. Like deprived of the moisturizing water from the roots, the wood becomes hard. Uh, the latent hardiness of the wood comes to the forefront, transforming itself into a rigid staff, so to speak. So therein maybe lies the connection between the Parsha of Matot and the time of the year which it's read. During the 3 weeks, we mourn our exile from our homeland and the removal of God's open presence in our lives as it used to be revealed in the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. We remember how the Shvatim of Israel, a people anchored to their roots, were torn from the tree, basically, and sent into dispersion to become a nation of homeless matot, rods, so to speak. But even as the Torah commands us to mourn the events of the 3 weeks, it insists that our mourning be a constructive endeavor, an opportunity to focus on how our state of exile, meaning our journey, which is actually the name of the Parsha, next Parsha Masei, meaning journey, might be exploited to a positive end. So as we look at the rootlessness of us being in the galus, in the galut, and the manner of our disconnection from our natural environment, from the branches, from the roots that were on the tree, it's this rigidity, these rods, this stiffness, that basically gives us our tremendous reserves and faith and fortitude that we have now, that are invoked by the challenges of being in the galus of an alien society. We would not be the people we could be would we had not have actualized who we are going to be and who we are now if we had remained a nation of shvatim, undisturbed from their stem. Okay, it's this rigidity and this toughness that's gotten us through the dispersion into the galus. And this concept of galus is expressed by the second parsha, Masei, meaning journeys. We're out on our journeys, which chronicles the travels and encampments of the people of Israel in the Sinai desert. And it lists all the places we went to, and it basically the galus that were in the dispersion until the next coming of the Mashiach and of the building of the next Beit HaMikdash were in essence still in galus. So both Matot and Masei are parsha read during the 3 weeks. Both are also in essence lessons on galus, dispersion. On the face of it, however, they seem to be different, even conflicting, and give different insights into the nature and the purpose of our exile. Matot instructs us how the purpose of galut is to invoke in us steadfastness, the immobility to the branch-turned rod, the stiffness, the toughness. Masei, on the other hand, journeys, regards galus as a journey, as a movement, change, and there can be transformation. So what happens when Matot and Masei unite into a single Torah reading as we have this week? Then the directive of the week is to integrate them both into a single approach to galus, Living with the times in such a week means discovering how your interaction with a hostile environment is not a challenge to your values and convictions, but their strengthening and their affirmation. It means discovering how your toughness, your rigidity, and intractability in your faith is not a hindrance to achievement and creativity, but actually an aid in your endeavor, in our endeavor as a Jewish people, to transform the world into which we have been dispatched on Galus and in exile on the mission to build a home for God. Thank you for listening to me, and I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom.